The moment Sarah Mitchell's fingers touched the harness, she knew something was different about this dog. Through the leather beneath her fingertips, she felt a subtle tremor, not fear, exactly, but wariness. The trainer's voice was bright, masking something Sarah couldn't quite identify. Meet Beacon. He's 3 years old, incredibly intelligent, and has completed all his training with flying colors. Sarah knelt down, letting her hands explore the dog's features. German Shepherd mix, powerful shoulders, a smooth coat that felt warm under her touch. But when her fingers brushed his muzzle, she felt a rough patch of skin, a scar. "He's been hurt before," she said. It wasn't a question. The trainer, Melissa, she'd introduced herself as hesitated. He had a difficult start in life. His previous owner wasn't kind. But trust me, he's ready now. Sarah had been blind since the age of 12, and in the 20 years since, she learned to read people through their voices. Melissa wasn't lying, exactly, but she wasn't telling the whole truth either. There was something about Beacon that made the trainer nervous. "Why this dog for me?" Sarah asked, still running her fingers through Beacon's thick fur. He remained perfectly still, allowing her touch without leaning into it like most dogs would. "Because you're both survivors," Melissa said simply. "And because I think you'll understand each other in ways others couldn't." Sarah considered this as she explored the dog's face once more. Her fingers found his ears, alert and attentive, and then traveled down to the harness again, the tool that would connect them, binding their paths together. It felt like a weighty responsibility suddenly, taking on an animal with his own history of trauma. "What if we don't click?" Sarah asked. Melissa's clothes rustled as she shifted position. "Give it 2 weeks. If it's not working, we'll find another match." "But Sarah, just give him time. He's special." As if understanding he was being discussed, Beacon moved for the first time, pressing his muzzle gently against Sarah's hand. The gesture was so unexpected, so deliberate, that Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. That had been 3 days ago. Now, in her small house on the edge of Riverbrook, Sarah was still trying to figure out the silent companion who had entered her life. Beacon performed his duties perfectly, guiding her through doorways, helping her navigate her daily walk to the library where she worked, alerting her to potential obstacles. But there was a distance to him, a reserve that seemed impenetrable. "It's just you and me now, Beacon," Sarah said, sitting on her couch while the dog lay at her feet. "I wish you could tell me your story." The dog sighed, a sound so human it made Sarah smile despite herself. Outside, the October wind rattled the windows of her small house. Riverbrook, nestled in the foothills of the Cascades, was known for its spectacular autumn colors, not that Sarah could see them anymore. But she remembered the brilliant reds and oranges, the way the sunlight glinted off the river that gave the town its name. Sarah had moved here 5 years ago, seeking a fresh start after her divorce. The town was small enough to navigate easily, but large enough to offer her the librarian position she'd trained for. The locals had embraced her, but there was still a loneliness she couldn't quite shake. Her phone buzzed, the automated voice announcing, "Mom calling." "Hi, Mom," Sarah answered, her free hand automatically finding Beacon's head. "How's it going with the new dog?" her mother asked, her voice sharp with concern. "We're adjusting," Sarah replied, feeling Beacon tense slightly under her touch. "He's very professional." "Professional?" "He's a dog, Sarah, not an accountant." "Does he like you at all?" Sarah bit back a sigh. "It's more complicated than that. He has trust issues." "Well, so do you," her mother said bluntly. "After what Mark did." "I don't want to talk about Mark," Sarah interrupted, feeling the familiar twist of pain at the mention of her ex-husband. "Beacon and I are figuring each other out. That's all." After ending the call, Sarah knelt beside Beacon. "Sorry about that," she murmured. "Mom's right?" To her surprise, Beacon nudged her hand with his nose, the second voluntary contact he'd initiated. Progress, however small. Sarah was about to stand when she felt it, a subtle vibration through the floorboards. At first, she thought it was a truck passing by, But then the vibration intensified, rattling the windows. A glass tumbled from her coffee table, shattering on the hardwood floor. "Earthquake," she whispered, heart racing. Beacon was on his feet instantly, pressing against her legs, guiding her away from the falling objects. She could hear the house groaning around them, the terrible symphony of possessions crashing to the floor. The power went out with a definitive click, plunging her into a darkness that, for once, others would share too. Outside, Sarah gasped, fumbling for Beacon's harness. "We need to get outside." But Beacon pulled in the opposite direction, toward the interior of the house. "No, Beacon. Outside is safer." Sarah tugged at the harness, panic rising in her throat as the floor seemed to roll beneath her feet. The dog remained firmly planted, refusing to budge toward the front door. Instead, he pulled her deeper into the house, toward the bathroom, the one room with no windows, no bookshelves, or heavy furniture to fall. As the walls continued to shake around them, Sarah had to make a choice: trust her own instincts or trust the animal beside her, whose past and motivations remained a mystery. In that moment, as the ground betrayed everything solid and known, Sarah made her decision. Sarah took a deep breath and released her resistance. "Okay, Beacon, show me." The dog immediately guided her to the bathroom, his body pressing firmly against her legs as another violent tremor shook the house. She heard the terrible crash of her bookshelf collapsing in the living room, right where they would have been heading if she'd insisted on her own way. Once inside the small bathroom, Beacon nudged her toward the bathtub. "In there?" Sarah asked incredulously. Beacon's insistent pressure against her leg was unmistakable. She climbed in, feeling ridiculous yet strangely secure as the dog jumped in beside her, his warm body curled protectively around her. The porcelain tub vibrated beneath them as the quake continued, but it held steady while the house groaned and objects shattered outside the bathroom door. After what seemed like an eternity, the shaking subsided. Sarah lay still in the bathtub, her arms wrapped around Beacon, her face buried in his fur. She was trembling uncontrollably, but the dog remained calm, his steady heartbeat anchoring her to reality. "You saved us," she whispered into his ear. "How did you know?" As if in response, Beacon licked her cheek once, a gesture so unexpectedly tender that tears sprang to Sarah's eyes. Whatever barriers had existed between them seemed to shift in that moment, not gone entirely but changed somehow. When Sarah felt confident enough to move, she cautiously climbed out of the tub, keeping one hand firmly on Beacon's harness. The house had gone eerily quiet, but distant sirens wailed outside, and she could hear neighbors calling to each other through open windows. "We need to check the damage," she said, though she was speaking more to herself than to Beacon. The dog led her carefully through the house, avoiding fallen objects with remarkable precision. In the living room, her fingers found the toppled bookshelf, books scattered across the floor. The kitchen was worse, broken glass crunched beneath her feet despite Beacon's attempts to guide her around it. "Not good," Sarah murmured, feeling a cabinet door hanging off its hinges. She reached for her phone in her pocket to call for help, but found only fragments. It must have shattered during the quake. Suddenly, Beacon tensed beside her, a low growl rumbling in his throat. "What is it?" Sarah asked, her heart rate spiking again. The dog pulled her urgently toward the front door. Outside, she could smell smoke, acrid and thick, carried on the wind. Fire. Somewhere in Riverbrook, something was burning. "We should stay here," Sarah said, fear creeping into her voice. "Emergency services will come." But Beacon was insistent, pulling at the harness with uncharacteristic force. Sarah hesitated, then relented. They stepped outside into chaos, neighbors shouting, car alarms blaring, the distant crackle of flames. "Sarah, thank God you're okay." It was her next-door neighbor, Ellen. "Are you hurt?" "No, we're fine," Sarah replied, her hand gripping Beacon's harness. "What's happening?" The gas station on Main Street exploded after the quake. Fires spreading toward the east side of town. "They're evacuating everyone to the high school." Ellen's voice shook. "My car won't start." I was about to walk there. We'll go together, Sarah offered, though the prospect of navigating unknown terrain during a disaster sent cold fear through her veins. Ellen hesitated. Are you sure? With your... I mean... Beacon will guide us, Sarah said with more confidence than she felt. Right, boy? The dog nudged her hand in what she chose to interpret as agreement. They set off, Ellen walking slightly ahead while Beacon guided Sarah. The familiar streets had transformed into an obstacle course of fallen branches, debris, and panicked townspeople. Several times, Beacon redirected Sarah away from dangers she couldn't see: a downed power line, a deep crack in the pavement, a fire hydrant spraying water across their path. He's incredible, Ellen remarked after Beacon navigated them around a tree that had fallen across the sidewalk. So focused. Sarah nodded, feeling a surge of pride. He knows what he's doing. As they approached Main Street, the smell of smoke intensified. Sarah could feel the heat of the fire on her face, hear the roar of flames and the shouts of firefighters. Beacon slowed, carefully assessing their path forward. Suddenly, a thunderous crack split the air. The bank building's collapsing. Someone shouted nearby. Everyone back. Panic erupted around them. Ellen grabbed Sarah's arm. We need to run. But in the confusion, Ellen's hand slipped away. Sarah stood frozen, disoriented by the cacophony of screams and crashing debris. Ellen, she called, her voice lost in the chaos. Beacon pressed against her, but instead of pulling her away from danger, he tugged her forward toward the sounds of destruction. No, Beacon. Back. Sarah commanded, trying to turn around. The dog remained firm, pulling insistently in the direction Sarah feared most. Please, no, she begged, tears streaming down her face. I can't. Beacon barked, the first time she'd heard him do so, and continued pulling. And then Sarah heard it, barely audible over the roaring flames, a child's cry for help, coming from somewhere near the collapsing building. Oh God, she whispered. Someone's there. The heat was becoming unbearable, sweat pouring down Sarah's face as Beacon guided her closer to the edge of disaster. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back, to save herself. But Beacon seemed determined, and that child's voice continued to call out, increasingly desperate. Sarah faced a choice even more terrifying than the one during the earthquake: trust Beacon and walk toward danger, or retreat to safety and abandon whoever needed help. As debris continued to rain down around them and the fire roared ever closer, Sarah made her decision. Take me to them, Sarah commanded, her voice steady despite her fear. Beacon surged forward with newfound purpose, navigating around fallen debris with remarkable precision. The child's cries grew louder as they approached. Sarah could feel the intense heat on her face, hear the crackle of flames devouring nearby structures. Sweat dripped down her back as Beacon guided her over rubble, his body a constant pressure against her leg. Hello, Sarah called out. Where are you? Here. The voice was small, terrified. I'm stuck. Please help. Beacon stopped, pulling Sarah down to her knees. Her hands found the source of the voice, a young boy, perhaps 8 or 9, trapped beneath a fallen beam. It wasn't crushing him, but it pinned his leg, preventing escape. I'm Sarah, she said, keeping her voice calm. What's your name? Jamie, the boy sobbed. The building fell and everyone ran and It's okay, Jamie. I'm going to help you. Sarah ran her hands along the beam, assessing its weight and position. Are you hurt anywhere else? Just my leg. It really hurts. Sarah felt around the beam again, her heart sinking. It was too heavy for her to lift alone. Jamie, I need to find someone to help us move this. I'll be right back. No. Jamie's panic was immediate. Don't leave me. Before Sarah could respond, Beacon barked sharply. She felt him move away from her side, something he'd never done before. Seconds later, she heard new voices approaching. Over here, a man's voice called out. There's someone trapped. 2 firefighters reached them, their heavy boots crunching on debris. "Ma'am, you need to step back," one ordered. "This area isn't safe. There's a boy trapped under the beam," Sarah explained, reluctantly moving aside. "His name is Jamie." As the firefighters worked to free the child, Sarah realized what had happened. Beacon had left her side to find help, something service dogs were not typically trained to do. He'd made a judgment call that went beyond his training. "Got him," a firefighter announced. "Kid's leg is injured, but he'll be okay." Sarah felt Beacon return to her side, pressing against her leg as if nothing unusual had happened. She knelt and wrapped her arms around him, burying her face in his fur. "You did it," she whispered. "You saved him." "Ma'am," one of the firefighters approached. "We need to get you both out of here." The fire's spreading fast. With Jamie secured on a stretcher, they all retreated from the collapsing building. Sarah kept one hand firmly on Beacon's harness, allowing him to guide her through the chaotic streets. The air grew slightly clearer as they moved away from the fire's epicenter. "That was your dog that found us, wasn't it?" the firefighter asked as they walked. "Never seen anything like it. He came straight to us, barking and pulling at my partner's sleeve." Sarah nodded, a surge of pride warming her chest. "His name is Beacon." "Well, he sure lived up to that name today." The firefighter's voice held genuine admiration. "You've got yourself a special animal there." They reached the high school evacuation center, a cacophony of voices, crying children, and harried emergency workers. Sarah felt Beacon press closer to her side, as if trying to shield her from the overwhelming sensory assault. "Sarah," Ellen's voice cut through the noise. "Oh my God, I've been looking everywhere for you." Her neighbor embraced her tightly. "When we got separated, I thought. I was so worried." "We're okay," Sarah assured her, though her hands were still trembling. Beacon found a child trapped under debris. He saved him. Ellen released her, and Sarah felt her neighbor's attention shift to the dog. "You are something else, aren't you?" Ellen murmured, presumably to Beacon. A medical volunteer approached, insisting on checking Sarah for injuries. She was guided to a cot, separated briefly from Beacon as they examined her for burns or cuts. The dog whined softly at being held back, a sound so vulnerable it made Sarah's heart clench. "Let him through," she insisted. "Please. He needs to be with me." The medical team relented, and Beacon immediately pressed against her side on the narrow cot. As the volunteer cleaned a cut on Sarah's arm she hadn't even realized was there, she stroked Beacon's head, feeling the scar on his muzzle that had first revealed his difficult past. "You've been through fires before, haven't you?" she whispered, realization dawning. "That's why you knew exactly what to do." Beacon didn't respond, of course, but his body seemed to relax against hers, as if relieved to be understood at last. Hours passed in the crowded gymnasium. Emergency broadcasts announced that the earthquake had registered 6.2 on the Richter scale, with Riverbrook close to the epicenter. The gas station explosion had triggered fires across the east side of town. Power and water were out across the county, with no estimate for restoration. "They're saying we'll be here at least overnight," Ellen explained, returning from an information booth. "Maybe longer. They're bringing in cots and supplies." Sarah nodded, exhaustion settling heavily onto her shoulders. Her world, carefully structured for navigation without sight, had been upended in a matter of hours. The familiar paths and landmarks she relied on had likely been destroyed or altered. When they eventually left the shelter, she would be navigating a changed landscape. As night fell, the gymnasium grew quieter. Ellen had found them a corner spot, slightly removed from the main crowd. She brought blankets and water, making their little area as comfortable as possible under the circumstances. "Try to get some sleep," Ellen advised. "I'll be right here if you need anything." Sarah lay down on the thin emergency cot, feeling Beacon settle on the floor beside her. She reached down, finding his fur with her fingertips. "I don't know what I would have done without you today," she whispered. Just as she was drifting off to sleep, Sarah felt something unexpected, Beacon climbing onto the cot beside her, his warm body curling protectively around hers. It was against all service dog protocols, completely unprofessional, and exactly what she needed. As she drifted off to sleep, Sarah realized that somewhere in the chaos of the day, amid fire and destruction, something had been built instead, a bridge of trust between her and the wounded animal who had saved not only her life, but others as well. Sarah's last conscious thought was a question that had been nagging at her since the earthquake. What had happened to Beacon before he came to her? What trauma had prepared him so perfectly for today's disasters? Tomorrow, she vowed, she would find out the truth. Sarah woke to the sound of unfamiliar voices and the feeling of emptiness beside her. Beacon was gone. Panic fluttered in her chest as she sat up abruptly, reaching out to where the dog had been. "Beacon," she called, her voice still rough from sleep and smoke inhalation. "Your dog's just over there," came Ellen's reassuring voice. "Some official-looking woman is with him." Sarah swung her legs off the cot, orienting herself in the unfamiliar space. "Take me to him, please." Ellen guided her through what felt like a maze of cots and people. As they approached, Sarah heard a voice she recognized, Melissa, Beacon's trainer. "I came as soon as I heard about the earthquake," Melissa was saying to someone. "I needed to check on Beacon and Ms. Mitchell." "Melissa," Sarah called out. "Sarah, thank God you're all right." Melissa's footsteps approached, and Sarah felt the woman's hands grasp hers. "When I heard Riverbrook was hit hard, I drove straight from Portland. How did you find us?" "Guide dogs get priority in emergency situations. The evacuation center had you registered." Melissa's voice lowered. "I understand Beacon performed exceptionally yesterday." Before Sarah could respond, a new voice joined the conversation, deep, authoritative, male. "Ms. Mitchell? I'm Captain Reynolds with Riverbrook Fire Department. I wanted to personally thank you and your dog. The boy you rescued, Jamie Wilson, he's going to be fine. Doctor says he would have suffered severe smoke inhalation if he'd remained trapped much longer." Sarah felt a flush of pride, but shook her head. It was all Beacon. He found Jamie, then brought back help. "That's actually what I wanted to discuss," the captain said, his tone shifting. "That's not standard guide dog behavior. In fact, it's quite extraordinary." Sarah felt Beacon return to her side, pressing against her leg. She knelt, wrapping an arm around him. "Where did he come from, Melissa? Before he came to me? You never really said." The silence that followed was telling. Finally, Melissa sighed. "Perhaps we should speak privately?" They found a quieter corner of the gymnasium. Sarah could sense tension in Melissa's movements as they sat on folding chairs. Beacon settled between them. Beacon was originally trained as a search and rescue dog, Melissa began, for a fire department in eastern Washington. He was exceptional, one of the best they'd ever seen. But there was an incident. "What kind of incident?" Sarah asked, her fingers instinctively finding the scar on Beacon's muzzle. "A warehouse fire. Beacon and his handler, a firefighter named Jack Pearson, were searching for survivors inside when part of the structure collapsed. Jack pushed Beacon out of the way, saving him, but Jack..." Melissa's voice faltered. "Jack didn't make it out." Sarah felt her breath catch. "He watched his handler die." "Yes. After that, Beacon wouldn't go near burning buildings. He'd freeze, shake uncontrollably. They tried retraining him, but the trauma was too deep. He was going to be retired completely when one of our trainers suggested trying him as a guide dog instead. His intelligence, his attention to detail, those were still intact." "So you erased his past," Sarah said, a hint of accusation in her voice. "You gave him to me without telling me any of this." "We didn't erase anything," Melissa countered gently. "We gave him a second chance. And yes, we should have told you more, but we weren't sure how it would affect his placement. Most clients want dogs without complications." Captain Reynolds cleared his throat. "The thing is, Ms. Mitchell, that training never really leaves them. Yesterday, when Beacon found that boy and then brought firefighters back, he was reverting to his original training. It overrode his trauma because someone needed saving. Sarah absorbed this information, her hand still resting on Beacon's head. Everything made sense now: his reserved demeanor, his immediate response to the earthquake, his knowledge of safe places during fires. He hadn't just been trained, he'd lived through it all before. "He saved me during the earthquake," Sarah said quietly. "Led me to the bathtub instead of outside. I thought he was being stubborn, but he knew exactly what to do." "That's SR training," Captain Reynolds confirmed. "They learned to identify safe spaces within structures." A thought occurred to Sarah. "Does he have any family?" "Jack's family, I mean." Melissa hesitated. "Jack's sister, Hannah, lives about an hour from here. She tried to adopt Beacon after Jack died, but she couldn't handle his trauma responses. It was too painful for both of them." Sarah nodded slowly, processing. "I'd like to meet her, if possible." "Are you sure that's wise?" Melissa asked. "It might be difficult For whom? Beacon? Me? Hannah?" Sarah interrupted. "Beacon saved lives yesterday because of what Jack taught him. His sister deserves to know that his legacy lived on." The conversation was interrupted by an announcement that emergency buses would be taking evacuees to neighboring towns with power and accommodations. Riverbrook would remain partially evacuated until infrastructure could be assessed. "You both can come back to Portland with me," Melissa offered. "The training center has emergency accommodations." Sarah shook her head. "No, I want to stay close. This is our home now, mine and Beacon's." She turned to the fire captain. "Is there anywhere in town that's safe to return to?" "The west side had minimal damage," he replied. "If your house is there, it might be habitable." "It is," Sarah confirmed. "On Willow Street. I'll have someone escort you home to check it out," the captain offered. An hour later, Sarah stood in her front doorway, Beacon at her side, as a firefighter named Rodriguez confirmed that her house was structurally sound, though the interior was still a mess of fallen objects. The power was out, but water service had been restored to her neighborhood. "Thank you," Sarah told him. "We'll be fine from here." After Rodriguez left, Sarah knelt beside Beacon in the silent house. "So you were a hero long before you came to me," she said softly, running her hands over his face, his scarred muzzle, his alert ears. "I wish you could tell me about Jack. I wish you could tell me everything." Beacon leaned forward, resting his head on her shoulder, a gesture so human-like it brought tears to her eyes. That night, with flashlights and emergency candles casting soft shadows on the walls, Sarah cleared enough space in the living room for them both to sleep comfortably. The silence of a town without power was eerie, but also peaceful in its way. "Tomorrow," Sarah told Beacon as she settled beside him, "we're going to find Hannah, Jack's sister. Would you like that?" The dog shifted, laying his head across her lap. Sarah smiled in the darkness, interpreting his movement as a scent. "I thought so," she whispered, stroking his fur. "It's time for both of us to face our pasts. Together." The next morning, Sarah called Melissa for Hannah Pearson's contact information. To her surprise, Melissa offered to drive them to Hannah's home in Pinecrest, an hour away. "Are you sure about this?" Melissa asked as they settled into her car, Beacon in the back seat. "Hannah took Jack's death hard. This might reopen old wounds." "Some wounds need reopening to heal properly," Sarah replied, her fingers absently stroking Beacon's fur. "Besides, don't you think she'd want to know that her brother's work, his training, saved lives?" The drive was quiet, the radio delivering reports of Riverbrook's recovery efforts. Power was being restored section by section, but it would be days before normalcy returned. Sarah listened, trying to imagine the changed landscape of her town. "We're here," Melissa finally announced, pulling into a driveway. Small blue house with a porch swing. Sarah heard a door open and footsteps approach. "Can I help you?" A woman's voice, hesitant, slightly defensive. "Hannah Pearson?" Melissa asked. "I'm Melissa Gardner from Pacific Northwest Service Dogs. We spoke on the phone about Beacon." A sharp intake of breath. "You brought him here?" The woman's voice trembled. Why would you? Because he saved lives, Sarah interjected, stepping out of the car. During the Riverbrook earthquake. And you deserve to know. Hannah was silent as Melissa helped Sarah up the walkway, Beacon guiding her with perfect precision. When they reached the porch, Sarah heard a soft sob. He looks so much the same, Hannah whispered. Older, but it's like seeing a ghost. May we come in? Sarah asked gently. Inside, Hannah's home smelled of coffee and cinnamon. Sarah sensed they were in a small, cozy living room. Would you like to pet him? Sarah offered, feeling Beacon press against her leg. I don't know if I can, Hannah admitted. The last time I saw him was at Jack's funeral. He was inconsolable. We both were. Sarah knelt beside Beacon, removing his harness, a signal that he was off duty. Beacon, say hello to Hannah. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Sarah felt Beacon move away from her side, his nails clicking softly on the hardwood floor. Hannah gasped, then broke into tears. Oh, sweetheart, she sobbed. You remember me, don't you? Across the room, Sarah heard the unmistakable thump of a tail wagging against furniture. She smiled, blinking back tears of her own. Over coffee, Sarah recounted the events of the earthquake, Beacon's instinctive leadership during the tremors, his bravery during the fires, his miraculous rescue of Jamie. The fire captain said he reverted to his search and rescue training, Sarah explained. That even after everything he went through, when someone needed help, he remembered what Jack taught him. Hannah was quiet for a long moment. Jack would have been so proud, she finally said, her voice steadier now. He always said Beacon was the smartest dog he'd ever trained. That's why it broke his heart when Beacon couldn't go back to work after what happened. I heard you tried to adopt him, Sarah said carefully. Hannah sighed. I did. I thought maybe we could heal each other. But every time the smoke alarm went off, or someone lit a fireplace nearby, he'd panic. And seeing him like that, knowing what happened to Jack, it was too much for both of us. He's still healing, Sarah said. So am I, in my own way. But together, we're figuring it out. What happened to you? Hannah asked, then quickly added, I'm sorry, that's too personal. Sarah smiled sadly. It's okay. I lost my sight in an accident when I was 12. But recently, I lost something else, my marriage. My husband decided that being married to a blind woman was too much work. He left 2 years ago. I'm sorry, Hannah said softly. Don't be. Turns out, he was right. I do need someone willing to work at it. Someone who understands that love means staying even when things get hard. Sarah's hand found Beacon's fur. Someone like this guy. A comfortable silence settled between them. Then Hannah spoke, her voice different, somehow lighter, unburdened. I have some things of Jack's. Photos of him with Beacon during training. A couple of videos. Would you like copies? I would love that, Sarah said warmly. Beacon's past shouldn't be a secret anymore. It's part of who he is. As Hannah gathered the mementos, Sarah knelt beside Beacon, running her hands over his familiar features. You remembered her, she whispered, and you didn't panic. You're healing too, aren't you? Later, as they prepared to leave, Hannah pressed something into Sarah's hand, a small metal object. Jack St. Florian medal, Hannah explained. The patron saint of firefighters. He always kept it on Beacon's original collar. I want you both to have it. Sarah's fingers traced the contours of the medal, feeling the embossed figure. Thank you. We'll treasure it. Standing on the porch, Hannah knelt to say goodbye to Beacon. Keep taking care of people, she told them. It's what you were born to do. It's what Jack loved about you. On the drive back to Riverbrook, Sarah sat quietly, the medal clutched in her palm, her other hand resting on Beacon's head. She could feel something shift between them, an understanding, a shared vulnerability. We're nearly home, Melissa announced as they approached Riverbrook. Power's back on in your neighborhood, according to the radio. Home. The word held new meaning now. Home wasn't just Sarah's carefully memorized house with its predictable layout. Home was wherever she and Beacon were together, navigating whatever came their way. A week later, as normalcy began returning to Riverbrook, Sarah sat on her porch, Beacon beside her. She'd attached Jack's medal to Beacon's collar, a small tribute to the man who'd first taught him to be brave. Ellen approached from next door, her footsteps familiar now. "They're honoring you two at the town council meeting tomorrow," she announced, "for heroism during the earthquake." Sarah smiled, her hand finding Beacon's head. "We were just doing what needed doing." "Well, the mayor thinks otherwise. Jamie's parents especially want to thank you." After Ellen left, Sarah turned to Beacon. "What do you think? Boy, ready to be a hometown hero?" Beacon's response was to rest his head on her lap, a gesture that had become comfortable, familiar. The next evening, as they prepared for the ceremony, Sarah knelt before Beacon, straightening his collar where the medal hung. "You know, they say that service dogs choose their person," she said softly. "But I think sometimes they find exactly who they were meant to save and who was meant to save them." Beacon pressed his nose against her cheek, his breath warm and steady. "Jack would be proud of you," she whispered, "but not half as proud as I am." Outside, the town was rebuilding. Inside, something else had been built, a bridge between two wounded souls who had found in each other exactly what they needed, not just a guide, but a companion for the journey ahead, whatever darkness it might hold.